and we've got folks jumping on Zoom right now. So as you do, welcome, and welcome to the Business Resiliency for Disasters workshop. And this is actually being co-hosted by a multitude of partners this morning, Dovetail Partners, and specifically Gloria Erickson as the Firewise Coordinator for St. Louis County has been the lead on this workshop, which, as you all know, was supposed to be in person in Ely, but we are trying to navigate the new norm, something that gets said often these days. So we just appreciate everyone jumping on the webinar. We actually have about 40 people registered today with the option to either view it live today or to watch it later. And so with that, I just wanted to remind everyone that this will be recorded and posted online so that we can get this out to folks that weren't able to participate today. Really appreciate those of you that are here physically with us in the Zoom room virtually. And with that, I wanted to just give you a couple kind of hints on Zoom if you haven't used it before. We are in a webinar Zoom presentation, which means that we are going to focus our resources, our bandwidth on our presenters so that we can provide the best quality possible. So with that, those of you that are participating remotely will not have your video on, and we will also keep you on mute just to eliminate any background noise, so we don't end up having a bunch of kind of white noise or static in the background. So we appreciate that. But with that, that can be a little frustrating if you need to talk or share some information or questions with us. So just want you to know that we do have a feature within Zoom where you can go ahead and click on the box that says chat, and it's going to be in the toolbar of Zoom. So depending on the way it's showing up on your screen, it might be either at the bottom of your Zoom window or the top, and just hover over that and it'll pop open an option that says chat. And when you click on chat, you can actually direct your chat comments to either myself, Ashley McFarland, who's kind of providing the host technical support for this webinar, or you can direct your comments directly to a panelist or to someone else that's attending. So please just let me know through that chat pod if you're having any issues, and specifically hopefully you're able to hear me, and that's the most important thing right now. So we are going to be sharing some PowerPoint slides with you today, and so that's what's going to be on your screen the majority of the time, although we do have our presenters, and as they are speaking you'll likely see their lovely faces as well. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters. Gloria Erickson will kind of kick us off this morning, and so you'll hear from her first. But then I just wanted to point out the other folks that we have with us helping with this webinar. First of all, Sarah Guy-Lavar, who is going to be talking to us a little bit about her experience being actively involved in a business during a fire situation. We've got Betsy Olivanti from the Small Business Administration is going to be presenting some information. She's also from the Northeast Minnesota Small Business Development Center. And then we also have with us two insurance agents from State Farm, Lindsey Keen and Roger Ooms, who's going to be available to field any questions we may have. So that, hopefully I got everybody. That rounds out our speaker list for today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gloria. And just one last thing, if anyone's having audio issues, hopefully folks can find that chat box and send me any chat messages you may have. And one last reminder that this is being recorded and will be shared. So, all right, with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Gloria.
Good morning, everyone, and I want to welcome you to our Business Resiliency for Disasters webinar. As Ashley said, my name is Gloria Erickson, and I am the Community Wildfire Project Manager for Dovetail Partners, and I'm also the St. Louis County Firewise Coordinator. You know, when I first had the idea of doing this workshop, it was really meant for the business community of Ely, Minnesota. Ely is my home, and I've lived here for 21 years. And this Business Resiliency for Disasters workshop was actually meant to focus on resiliency from a wildfire event or a high wind event, because these are our highest risks in our Ely area. But when this coronavirus, COVID-19 panic crisis hit our country, Our presenters and I deliberated on whether we should even have this workshop. I mean, it was really obvious we couldn't do it in person, and it couldn't be a workshop as we had planned. But the information regarding disaster situations and creating a business continuity plan is relevant in any disaster situation, particularly the COVID-19 pandemic crisis that we're in right now. So we decided to go ahead and do the presentation virtually. So we really, really want to say we appreciate you taking the time out of your lives to participate in this webinar, and we really hope to provide you with a roadmap on how to develop your own business continuity plan. We're going to have resources that are available to you, but most of all, we want you to know that we are here to answer your questions and to direct you to the place or people that can help you right now. Some of the information that we're going to be presented will initially start out pretty locally based here in Ely, but the majority of the information is universal, and we really do encourage you to look at similar organizations or people in your region that can help you. So with that, Ashley, you want to do the next slide?
Yes.
These are some of our sponsors and supporters in our webinar, and we really appreciate all that they did for us to help us kick this off. Next slide. So some of you on the call might not be familiar with Ely, Minnesota. Ely is located in the northeast corner of Minnesota. We are approximately 60 miles as the crow flies from the Canadian border, and on the western edge of what's referred to as the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. Our town of Ely has a population of approximately 3,400 people. The surrounding area is rural with townships, residential, seasonal homes, and we're all nestled into a beautiful boreal forest called the Superior National Forest with lakes all around. Next slide. Our highest disaster risk in what we call the Arrowhead region of Minnesota is wildfire. As you can see in this map provided by the U.S. Forest Service, the red area and the orange area shows the highest loss that an area will have due to an event, a wildfire event. Next slide. And as you can see with a close-up of that map, Ely is right in the center of bright orange and bright red of a high loss for wildfire. And that also includes high wind events as well. So Ely has experienced, you want to back up, Ashley? Ely has experienced wildfire events and high wind blowing events. And very recently, we've had to evacuate our homes. There's been property damage, impassable roads, and a lot of power outages. For the past 6 years, I've been working with local residents and landowners to identify and implement actions that they can do to help them be more resilient to wildfire. And I also work with the communities on strategic planning for before, during, and after a wildfire event. A large part of the community's ability to survive a disaster situation is to make sure that our businesses survive. So creating a business continuity plan can help you increase your chances of riding out a disaster and hopefully get you back in business. Next slide. This is a slide from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or what's commonly known as FEMA. As you can see, FEMA has found that immediately following a natural disaster, 40% of small businesses won't reopen. A year later, 25% of those small businesses will close. 3 years later, if you don't have a business continuity plan, they predict you will fail. Your business will fail. And as you can see from this slide, the average daily loss of a business that closes due to disaster in a small business, $3,000 a day. In medium-sized businesses, $23,000 a day. So why do we care about this? Because 99% of all companies are small businesses. Small businesses employ 50% of all private sector employees. The potential of small businesses not being able to reopen after a disaster, it's really a fact that really keeps me up at night when I think about all the small businesses in Ely, Minnesota. Many of the owners are very close friends of mine. So our small businesses are really the backbone of our economy, and particularly in our rural areas. Next slide. This is a slide from the Census Bureau of 2019. It's a representation of all the businesses in Ely. For those of you on the call that are not from Ely, our top businesses are retail trade, accommodations and food services, educational services, healthcare, and social services. Before this webinar, I actually sent out a survey to the business owners in Ely, and the majority of the people that responded were in these top 4 categories. Also, the people that responded, 80% of you own your building and the property that your business is located on. You also, the average amount of people that you employ are 2 to 5, but many of you employ over 11 people in our community. So any disaster situation is going to have a major effect on our economic livelihood in our community, really in any community. So the workshop today will focus on how you as a business owner can prepare and respond before, during, and after a disaster event. We hope that you will be able to walk away from this webinar with the tools to be able to work on your own business continuity plan that will also include evacuation and reunification planning for not only you, but your family and your employees. Next slide. This is a picture of the 2012 Highway 1 fire that occurred approximately 1 mile south of Ely and resulted in half of the town being asked to evacuate their homes. Our first speaker today, most of the Ely folks know, is Sarah Guy-Levar. Sarah, at the time of the Highway 1 fire, was the acting executive director for the Dorothy Malter Museum. I asked Sarah if she would share with us her experience during that fire and the lessons learned regarding the importance of making an emergency plan. Sarah?
Thanks, Gloria. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation to share my story. As Gloria said, I served as the executive director of the Dorothy Malter Museum from 2007 to 2018. The museum consists of 2 nearly 100-year-old tamarack log cabins, and then the photo on the left you can see is our interpretive center, which is a half-log cedar-sided cabin. These cabins are set in a 70-year-old stand of mature red pines. In 2011, I co-authored a biography, Dorothy Malter, the Rip Your Lady, and fortunately, the book was a finalist in the Northeastern Minnesota Book Awards. The ceremony happened to take place the same day as the fire. The ceremony was being held at the University of Minnesota in Duluth. And throughout the event, I was checking my Twitter feed, talking to some people in Ely, and I was starting to become more and more nervous as the event went on. The museum really is a significant cultural resource in Ely, as well as an employer. And there was a perfect storm, no pun intended, of events that made me very nervous. At the time, the museum did not have an emergency response plan. And as it happened, we had 5 key holders. 2 of them, my co-author and co-worker, were in Duluth. Another key holder was Peg Rosette. She was a board member and tour guide of the museum, but unfortunately she lived south of the fire, so she couldn't get to the museum. The cell phone towers were down, and so I couldn't get a hold of my board president. And then last but not least, the other key holder was out of town. So I had no way of getting anybody to the museum. That was pretty disconcerting. Fortunately, my husband kept me calm through the event by sharing that in between the fire and the museum at that time was a softball field, a cement plant, and the cemetery. So there was a bit of a fire break, but it only helped calm my nerves a little bit. Once I went through that experience, I realized that I needed to take some steps to protect the museum and to protect my livelihood and that of my employees as well. So I did apply for legacy amendment funding through the state of Minnesota. The Minnesota Historical Society runs a grant program which is funded by the Legacy Amendment. And so I did receive an award to be able to go through the process of creating an emergency plan. And I won't go into detail of that plan, but just some things in the plan that would apply to small business owners. First and foremost, make sure you have enough key holders that live near the building. So I make sure that there's at least 2 people in town that have keys to the museum. We also made sure that we had our QuickBooks software, accounting software, backed up, and then also removed that backup from the site each day. I know that could be solved now with people using QuickBooks Online versus the desktop, but at that time, only the desktop version was available. We also created a list of people to move collection items that we prioritized for their significance in telling Dorothy's story that would be applicable to museums and cultural sites. And then we also secured off-site storage for those collection items so we wouldn't be scrambling to find a place to keep them. As far as preparing for fire, we also contracted to remove quite a bit of brush and undergrowth around the museum. And then we also worked with the Vermilion Community College forest skills class to remove trees, to reduce trees around the cabin. And then also we have a sweet little 0.2 of a mile hiking trail to remove some of the dead trees from that area to reduce the fuel load. So I hope some part of my story resonates with you and inspires you to take the steps needed to protect your business.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you joining us today. Our next speakers are Betsy Olivanti. She is a consultant from the Northeast Minnesota Small Business Development Center, and Lindsey Keen, who is a local contractor, the agent for State Farm Insurance. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Lindsey.
Absolutely. Can you all hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. So I am Betsy Olivanti. I'm a small business development consultant for the Northeast Minnesota SBDC. We are funded by the Small Business Administration federally and Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development statewide. I also have other funders through the IRRR, various cities, and the city of Ely is definitely one that funds my office to work with small businesses in the city of Ely proper. So if you could hit the next slide, please. So these are where we have offices. The little stars there. We have one up in International Falls, one over in Grand Rapids in Itasca County. We have offices in Duluth. My office is in Virginia, Minnesota at Mesabi Range College, and then I work out of Ely as well. And then we have a cohort or a colleague working over in Grand Marais. And so there's about 11 of us small business development consultants doing this work across the Northeast region. We work together to help entrepreneurs and businesses grow and succeed. And truly our work right now has been to help them continue in business. So during this interesting time we're living in. If you could hit the next slide, please. Okay, so we do a lot of our work through business consulting on how to start, do a plan, research your market and who's going to purchase from you, record keeping, e-commerce, website development, search engine optimization, loan packaging, those sorts of things. We also present workshops such as the Business Resiliency for Small Business Today, starting a business, writing a business plan, developing financial projections, all those sorts of things. We have some workshops coming up in Ely again through the Ely Chamber this fall on DIY or do-it-yourself digital marketing, search engine optimization, and financial projections. So look for us to be up in the Ely area and in the entire region doing different workshops and things throughout northeastern Minnesota. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to keep moving my little chat heads around here so that I can see the slides. But natural hazards are like floods, wildfire, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, all those sorts of things are things that small businesses face once in a while, right? The Highway 1 fire was in 2012, I believe they said. So that, it seems like, oh, okay, that was 8 years ago. How much do I really have to prepare for these sorts of things? But we also, as you can see today, have health hazards, such as widespread and serious illnesses like COVID-19 and the coronavirus. There's human-caused hazards, accidents, acts of violence, arson, things like that. And there could be technology-related hazards. There's been this thing called Zoom bounce lately, where folks will bounce into your Zoom and kind of disrupt your typical meeting. So there are different hazards and things out there that you should be prepared for and thinking of as you run your small business to ensure that your business can be conducted normal operations as usual in spite of what's happening around you. Next slide, please. So the plan basics are to identify the risks that you face. Up in Ely, Minnesota, we may not face things like hurricanes, but wildfire, tornadoes, large winds, those sorts of things, definitely. This COVID-19 situation is nationwide. Technology-related risks could happen. So we need to identify our risks, look at what the plan should be around them. How do we mitigate them? What are the things that we need to address? We should take action to develop a plan to mitigate those risks. And then we should recognize and inspire others to do the same. Because if one small business is prepared and ready to address whatever might come their way, but the entire rest of Main Street or all the other small businesses in your town are not prepared, your vendor supply list, your clients, your customers, all that sort of stuff might be disrupted no matter what you do. So inspiring others to jump on board and make a plan is one way that you can help your community overall and plan for the future. Next slide, please. So the pillars of preparedness, you can see these circles, and obviously this plan starts with you. And then you need to look outside of yourself and realize that the folks you come into contact with every day are friends and family. And outside of that, your sphere of influence includes employees. And then finally, your entire business needs to be prepared. So you need to look at staff, what needs to be done with your staff, what needs to be done with your structures, your systems, your equipment, your IT. what needs to be done to connect with suppliers and things like that during this time, and how do you deliver an uninterrupted service during a natural or other disaster. Next slide, please. Excuse me, I'm going to keep my my vocal cords working here with a little bit of coffee. So you need to look at both direct and indirect business impacts. So this little graphic that we have right now is something that the SBA and the SBDC nationally put out, and it's Keep Calm and Small Business On. You do that by looking at what are the direct impacts in your business, your property, equipment, your assets, building, your people. How do you make sure that that stuff is all continuing to operate? And then the indirect impacts are the labor market overall, transportation, if you can't get supplies to your business or ship things out. And what about the utilities to your business? If your business requires IT infrastructure, power, water, lights, those sorts of things, how does an interruption in that affect your business? Next slide. So when I was looking around to kind of prepare for this seminar, there was a site called ready.gov that talked about a preparedness policy. And so thinking about this for your small business, you need to make sure that your policy for preparing for any type of disaster that might affect your small business is consistent with your mission and vision, and it defines the roles and responsibilities of the people that you have on your staff, and it defines the goals and objectives of your preparedness program. So you need to protect your employees, visitors, contractors, others from risk of hazard at your facility. If there is a roof cave-in or windows that get blown out during a high wind event, or there's a fire and your business and your facility is no longer safe to enter, you need to plan for that and understand what things are inside your business that might present a hazard. How would your policy address maintaining your service by minimizing interruptions or disruptions? A lot of folks are going to things called curbside delivery right now. Libraries, craft stores that are helping people make the homemade masks, things like that. They're all coming up with ways to deliver their service and minimize interruptions while living in this new normal that they're in. You need to think about protecting facilities, equipment, electronic information during a disaster. And you should think about environmental contamination and making sure that you're communicating with folks about what different types of hazardous materials may you have inside your building, that if there's a lot of water and outflow from your facility, what could happen. And then you also need to think about protecting your organization's brand, your image, your reputation. If you have somebody posting things on your social media during the time of a disaster, you want to make sure that they're using messaging and narratives and stories that are consistent with your brand and preserving your reputation. You want to make sure that that is done in a manner that is in keeping with your brand. Next slide, please. So this, Gloria, I'm going to turn this slide back over to you.
Okay, this is a slide representing actually a lot of the type of work that I do right now, working with landowners and residents. And one of the key things of being prepared that we talk about is building what we call a go kit. The go kit is the key items that you would need if you needed to leave your home and leave your home quickly. And so we suggest that people have a tote and they have some of these items that you see listed on the slide to be ready to go. A lot of times in a wildfire situation, you really have 5-10 minutes to get out of the building. So this would also apply actually to your business as well. Think about the go kit that your business might need to have and have that prepared. Betsy and Lindsey are going to go more into the types of things, insurance documents, backup, hard drive, that kind of thing, things for you to think about as a business that should be in your Go Kit. Another thing we recommend is that you have your employees have a Go Kit possibly in their vehicles at work as well, because many times, perhaps in a business situation, you're at work, a wildfire hits, and you are not able to get back to your home to get your Go Kit. So it's really important to have this ready, and to have a first aid kit in your vehicle as well. And as far as being prepared, make a plan. Determine a meeting place outside of your work or your home that you can reunite with your family. Say a wildfire or a disaster strikes when you're at work, your kids are at school, and they need to be evacuated. Where are you going to meet? Are you going to meet somewhere outside in town? Are you going to meet at an aunt's or a grandmother's, something like that? But just make sure that you have a plan, that your family has a plan, and that you have the information of where your employees are also going to go. We want to make sure that everyone is safe in a disaster situation, and when it's time to get up and running, or keep checking in with your employees and your family members, you want to know where everyone is at. Another thing is to learn about the disaster plans that are in your immediate area. First of all, again, as we're talking about your work, what is your disaster plan at your work? If you're a business owner, this is what we're talking about, is creating a disaster and evacuation plan and sharing that with your employees so everyone is on board as to what that looks like and what people's roles are. Another thing is to find out, does your children's school have a disaster plan or an evacuation plan? If there's a wildfire that strikes when they're in school, how are they going to get the kids out? How can you get a hold of your child to be reunited? Another thing is, if you have a senior facility care, do they have a plan? If you have a parent in a facility, you need to know what their plan is on getting people out and where they're going to shelter them. And other places where your family might be, recreational centers, churches, everyone should really have an evacuation plan. So the next thing is to get familiar with your local emergency management office. Here in Ely, Minnesota, our emergency manager is Officer George Berger, and Ely has an
slide, please, Ashley.
George Berger has a emergency operations plan for the city of Ely, and so you also want to find out what your disasters or hazards are, what your risks are. Like I said, in Ely, our highest risks here are wildfire and high wind events. Also, find out if there's a sign up for an emergency alert and notification. Ashley, maybe if you could do the next slide, it might kind of tie into what I'm talking about. Thank you. So this is George Berger's from Ely, Minnesota. This is his contact information. It's Ely's city site that has the Ely emergency operation plan. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And the county level, Ely is rather unique. The city of Ely is in St. Louis County, but many of our outlining townships are in Lake County. Know that the emergency manager for Lake County is BJ Kolstead. The emergency manager for St. Louis County is Dewey Johnson. I have slides for both of them. They both have websites in their Homeland Security emergency management. Both counties have a notification system that I encourage all Ely and Ely Township residents to get on the notification list. You just go to that 911 website, county website, and you sign up, and you will have alert for any kind of emergency situation via your cell phone. They text message if there's any disaster that you should know about. Also, I think it's really important to identify what your emergency alert system is in your area. Some areas, Ely, WELY is our notification radio station. But as we found out during the Highway 1 fire, when there was no power and there was no generator, we couldn't get information through that radio station. So find out, do you have a siren system? Maybe in Ely, we are very fortunate to have a ham radio group of people, and they also help in getting messages out and being part of the team, our emergency management team. So next slide, please. This is our FEMA representative, our state FEMA representative, Jim McCluskey. And then for our region, we are in actually Region 5 of FEMA, and our representative is Kimberly Phillips. If you find out that when you're trying to research some of these emergency plans, evacuation plans, if you discover that there really is no plan in place, I really encourage you to take the lead and talk to your emergency manager, talk to George Berger, and let's create a task force and get an emergency plan in place and do a tabletop just to test that plan. So next slide, go ahead, Betsy. Thank you.
Wonderful. So thanks, Gloria. So as Gloria said, we're in FEMA Region 5. You can see the map there. It serves Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin, as well as 34 federally recognized tribes in our states. Next slide. None of us technically work for FEMA, so we're including this information here, but you know, we would encourage you to connect with your FEMA reps in the situation if there was a disaster that was FEMA controlled. They will come in. They provide advice, training, funding, all those sorts of things. And they employ over 160 full-time employees right now in Region 5 and can bring in more than 500 disaster assistance employees. And I think that you've seen, if you're paying attention at all to the SBA or the Small Business Administration, right now they're hiring for additional folks to provide assistance to small businesses and in the loan departments, et cetera. So our federal government does have some response policies and processes in place to bring additional folks on when needed. Next slide. So this is the process that we found on the FEMA site, that in the event of some kind of a disaster where FEMA is involved, the state requests FEMA support. I think you saw during this COVID-19 situation, the governor declared a peacetime emergency so that we could be able to receive SBA disaster loans for small businesses and other businesses in our state. The same thing happens in the event we need to work with FEMA. FEMA then coordinates with critical infrastructure and cybersecurity in the SBA because our entire economy, as Gloria said, you know, 50% of the economy is resting on small business employees. And so the entire federal government, state government, local governments all want small businesses to be open and operating. So we bring resources to bear when necessary. Next slide, please. So these are all the community lifeline components. When they do root cause analysis, they ask, you know, what's happening? What does that mean for the area? Now, what do we do about that, and what's the gap? So they look at these areas: safety and security, food, water, and sheltering, health and medical, energy, communications, transportation, and hazardous materials. And right now, obviously, we're looking at safety and security for the COVID-19 situation. We're talking through what does it mean to shelter in place. We're looking at what can our health and medical systems do, what is their processes, what is the maximum capacity they have. We're looking at what are the communications that are needed to to have everybody working and doing distance learning and things like that. So we look at all 7 of these, and then we try and figure out exactly which of them we need to address and figure out what the gap analysis is and move forward from there, addressing that in the best way we can. Next slide. So public assistance through these systems then there's supplementary federal assistance to state and local tribal governments. I think you've seen in the past, FEMA will come into a community that's struggling with a natural disaster or other. They look at certain private nonprofits, NGOs, to help with the delivery of different assistance. We've seen the Red Cross, we've seen food shelves, things like that, get additional assistance to provide for their communities. They may create a special purpose district. They work to remove debris and put in place protective measures if possible. And then they start looking at permanent repairs for roads, bridges, utilities, all those sorts of things. The cost share from FEMA is 75% federal, 25% non-federal, and the president is authorized to add additional funds if needed. Next slide. They look at individual assistance as well for households. Do folks need housing assistance? Grants for replacement of personal property, transportation, medical expenses, things like that. We have a declaration right now for disaster unemployment assistance through the Federal Stafford Act. So folks who are self-employed and run small businesses can access unemployment in Minnesota, through the state of Minnesota, through DEED. That's uimn.org is the website that addresses that. So the Stafford Act allows the federal program to be utilized for folks that typically cannot access it in the face of a disaster like we're facing right now. They do sometimes deploy crisis counseling, legal services, and case management as well if needed. Next slide. So again, the sequence of delivery then is the voluntary agencies with sheltering, donated goods and services, and cash donations try to get those things together and deployed in the areas needed. Insurance will step in and look at what claims need to be made right away. Federal resources step in with FEMA grants and SBA disaster loans. Those are active right now. We have the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program that is operating through the Department of Treasury right now. And then obviously other various local and state agencies doing those as well. And then they look at unmet needs. They look at case management to identify the additional resources for gaps that haven't been addressed so far. Next slide, please. So this, I believe, is Lindsey, correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I am Lindsey Keen, the local State Farm agent here in Ely. Along with me on the line, I have my business lines underwriter, Roger Holmes. He's our small business insurance expert and helps me set up the best insurance coverage plans based on each individual business need. I've been with State Farm for 10 years. I took over the Ely agency June 1st of last year. We have 4 full-time licensed team members in the office here on Chapman Street and have over 20 years of collective insurance experience between us. We have been focusing on our community here in Ely and the surrounding townships, helping individuals, families, and small businesses to review and set up an appropriate insurance plan for their situation. In the next couple slides, we have some tips for some important things to look for in your current insurance plan. The worst time to find out you don't have what you need is during a loss. So it's a good idea to review it beforehand. We also have some tips for the next steps after a loss occurs. And I just want to point out that we are here to help. We'll review your current policy. Even if you're not with State Farm, we can help you kind of pick out some things that might be missing or things that you might need. So don't be afraid to reach out to us, even if you're not with State Farm, because we're happy to help. We want to make sure our community partners are in a good place. So Yeah, on this first slide, we have some things to do to put into your plan for being ready just in case. The first one is we recommend you review your insurance coverage at least every 3 years. Here in our office, we try and do it at least every 18 months. So we like to bug our small business owners to make sure that we're just not missing anything. We recommend taking inventory, document, photographs, everything, equipment, supplies, and the general workplace. Nowadays with technology, you can often just take photos and email them to yourself, and you have that sent file. Have copies of your insurance policies and customer service phone numbers. Obtain business interruption insurance. Things to consider in there are accounts receivable, valuable papers coverage, and business interruption insurance, which covers the money that you have coming in, that loss of use piece of it. If you have a business owner's protection package, check the co-insurance provisions. So sometimes there's pieces that aren't covered or that need to be covered somewhere else. So it's important to make sure that you know if some of those things aren't covered, and those are some of the gaps. We can go to the next slide. After the disaster, so here in our office, we recommend that you call us first. And if you don't have a local agent, these are just some important tips to remember. But if you are with us, you can always call. We'll help you kind of figure out those next steps. We like to be involved in that process. Always use caution when entering your business. Check for power lines, gas leaks, and structural damage. We don't want you to get hurt going in there. If any electrical equipment is wet, contact an electrician. And then we ask that you minimize additional damage. So do some mitigation to make sure that there isn't, whether that's tarping a roof or, if it's a fire, sometimes that's hard, but just making sure that there won't be additional damage above and beyond. Take pictures before you clean anything up. And we also ask a lot of times that you hold on to stuff that you remove if it's damaged, so property and stuff like that, just until we can get out there and take a look at it. But photos are great. I mean, they tell a lot. Prepare your last information for insurance claims, so keep track of everything, receipts, hours, different people that you have come out. If you have somebody come out and tarp the roof or something like that, keep track of that. That will all go. And we also recommend that you get estimates for the damage. And that's one of the first things we recommend. If it's a big loss, it's not as big a deal, but sometimes when it's a little loss, it's a good idea to get an estimate ahead of time, because then you know if it's over your deductible and you don't end up with a claim on your record that you don't necessarily need. We always recommend that. And we have some local contractors that we can recommend, and you're welcome to use whoever you want. That's a good idea to kind of get an idea. The other nice thing about doing that is if you do have a contractor that's come out and they've given you some estimates and you like them, they can be there when the adjuster comes out as well, and they can make sure that everybody's on the same page, and it does oftentimes help, things don't get missed as much. That's all I have, unless anyone has questions. Oh, we have this brochure. So we actually have this in the office. So if you'd like to stop by and grab it, we also have some other workbooks and stuff like that. But this just gives some tips for reducing the wildfire risk. Exterior, interior, and I think on the next slide there's some other ones, but some different things to really kind of reduce that risk or mitigate that damage if something does happen. So defensible space, fire-wise, huge on that, and it's really good tip. Making sure there isn't litter around the building, clean out dead plants, remove small branches and needles. We also recommend if you do have a deck that you have the lattice around the bottom, because then it won't collect as much of that little debris, which can act as kindling. Make sure your roof is Class A fire rated. Make sure vents have that metal mesh screen over it that'll prevent some of those embers from coming in. Double pane windows, making sure that awnings, decks, patios, and everything are as fireproof as possible. I know that's not always totally possible, but you know, if you can get materials that are not as flammable. And then we actually recommend that you don't store combustibles under your deck, but if you need to, making sure that they are enclosed if possible.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And I think we're gonna, if people have questions, just wanted to point out that an additional Zoom resource we have is the Q&A box. And in the Q&A, you can enter questions as you have them and start entering them in there. And then we can address those later on. But if any Q&A comes through right now, Lindsay, we can address those. I'll just monitor this just for maybe 30 seconds to see if anything comes in. But if not, then we can turn it back over to Betsy.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing anything yet, but please, to all of our participants, feel free to drop some questions in that Q&A box. If they land in the chat, that's fine too, but the Q&A is much easier to manage, so we can make sure that to get your question answered. And there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end of Betsy's presentation at the conclusion. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and turn it back over to Betsy.
Sure. So, okay, a lot of what we're talking about coming up now is from the ready.gov website. So they've got a lot of great resources there. So I would encourage you to check out that website to start getting your plans together. So ready.gov/business. Go ahead and next slide, please. So this business continuity planning is present at that website, and they talk through being able to understand what your impact analysis is, your recovery strategies, the plan development, and then testing and exercising, as Gloria referred to it, called a tabletop test. So all of these resources, they have some seminars or webinars that you can attend, little videos you can watch on that ready.gov website, and they're very helpful. I've looked through a few of them, and I'd encourage you, if you're going to actively do this planning after our webinar, I would encourage you to check out this website and get started there. Okay, next slide. So one of the toolkits is called Open for Business, or OFB-EZ. So it's an easy intro to building your continuity plan. It's for small and medium-sized businesses. There's an accessible online template with capability to put your specific information. And if you use today's information, you can print it out, and it puts you right on the path to going to getting your business continuity plan done and ready for tabletop testing. So I would encourage you, as we go along today, to jot some notes down in each of these different workbook pages, as it was called, and get your continuity plan started right as we're in this webinar. Next slide. So the packet then includes information about looking at your risks, what your operations, what you'll need to address there, looking at your key employees and how to assign roles and responsibilities around the Open for Business packet, who your key customers, contacts, suppliers, and vendors are, and writing them down. You look through your information technology needs, your finances, any equipment that you have, getting a list together, as Lindsay said, before the loss event happens, looking at how you would update your plan and test it, and then where to go for help with your plan. Next slide, please. So if we look first at the risks, there's this page that you can start looking through, right? And you're going to look through your small business and where you're located and think through what these different threats could do to your small business, and are they a probability for you? And how would that affect your supply chain if you needed to get goods and services to your small business to keep delivering service? What could a computer system breach do?
Betsy? Betsy, are you able to hear me? Betsy? Unfortunately, her audio just cut out. Did anybody else have audio issues?
Yeah, I lost her.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if she can even hear us because it appears she's still talking. Sorry everyone about this. Just hold on one second. Let me try to chat with her. That was really random because it just kind of stopped all at once.
Oh, so sometimes my computer, sorry, Ashley, thanks for putting that in the chat. Sometimes my computer, Zoom, mutes my computer all on its own. It'll crash the service. So
maybe it's one of those Zoom bugs that you were talking about.
Yep, it is. And usually I watch for those two buttons to light up, but this time I missed it.
No worries, and just maybe start at this risk slide again.
I was going to say, yeah, where did I cut out?
Yeah, why don't we, it might not be perfect, but let's go ahead and start at the risk slide again. Thank you.
Yep.
You left off at computer system breach, which I thought was ironic.
Oh, it is ironic. Thank you. Yes. Yes. So looking at those kinds of things, your small business, as you can see, there's a few things on the right-hand side, power outages, what have you. And then there's a few things on this left-hand side in that workbook that you should consider what the probability of those risks are, what the severity to your particular business is, and what you need to do about that. So one of the things too is that at the bottom of that page, there are other risks that your business may face that others may not. And so you can add certain things in for your locale, your particular business, etc. And feel free to write those in so that you don't forget to address them. You may decide later that this is something that you don't need to necessarily address, but write down your thoughts right now so that you can make sure that you think them through all the way to their conclusion. Next slide, please. So operations, you need to think through, obviously your largest selling item, if you're a retail store, is maybe very evident to you. If you're a beauty salon, doing hair may be your main thing that you do. But think through what your products and services are and how you produce them. What's necessary to perform these functions? Who does them? You know, because maybe certain of your employees do certain parts of your business that others may not do. And what are the things that are most likely to impact your ability to do these functions? So who are your customers? Who uses the output from these functions? So sometimes, you know, as you're doing your operations, sitting down and thinking these things through, you do this at the beginning, right? You figure out your target market, who's going to buy from you. But then you're in operations 5, 7, 10 years, and you don't think these things through as frequently. So sit down, go through those, and understand what they mean to your small business and what an interruption in the delivery of them would mean. Next slide, please. All right, think through who are your employees. Make sure you have a complete list of them and all of the contact information. As we talked about earlier, WELY wasn't able to communicate with folks because the power was out and there was no generator. What if during, there was a time a few years ago when Grandma's Marathon and Land of the Loon celebration were on the same weekend and all cell phones in Virginia, Minnesota were down. And I believe they were down in a larger area as well because they were just completely overloaded with traffic. How would you reach your employees without cell phones? What are the contact methods that you could use? Do you have their current home, mobile numbers, addresses, email addresses, emergency contact information? What if you can't reach your employees, but you could reach their emergency contact instead and get information back to them that way? Is your employee contact information available outside of your physical location? Do you have that so you can access it from home? as Sarah was talking about, they couldn't necessarily get to the site of the Dorothy Moulter Museum. So how do you connect with these folks if you can't get into your store? Next slide, please. Who are your key customers, contacts, suppliers, and vendors? Where are they located? Are they experiencing a disruption or a disaster in the area that they exist in that may affect your business, even though the disaster doesn't present itself in your particular location? Do you have alternate or backup suppliers and shippers in place? So if one of your suppliers is on the West Coast and they have something going on over there, can you access the same supplies and key ingredients to your processes somewhere else so that your business isn't interrupted? So understanding who your alternates are, request copies of your suppliers' business continuity plans if they have them. This might be the prompt for them to even create one. And establish a notification list and the procedures. What if you as the owner can't necessarily get into your operations, but one of your employees can? What would you empower that person to do to connect with folks if need be? Think that through and write it down. All right, next slide, please. So thinking through then, all of our businesses today are dependent on cell phones and websites and Facebook pages and digital marketing and all those sorts of things to both tell people what it is that we're doing and then to communicate with our customers and our employees. So determine which data and records are vital to continue performing your critical functions. Make sure they're backed up on more than one type of media. As Sarah was saying, all of their financial documents before were contained on the QuickBooks desktop version at the museum site itself. Now, if you have access to cloud-based technology for online critical financial documents, those sorts of things, how are they backed up? You know, what are you doing to ensure that you can access them from anywhere? Do you know, is all of your password and username information stored on the laptop or desktop that's at your physical site? Or do you know how to log into them off-site? Because I know, you know, some of us get really handy with, oh, yep, save that password, right? We have a password control software on our laptop at work, and we use it to.
Betsy's muted again. That's an interesting glitch she has. It's like one of those lip sync videos. You can try to figure out what she's saying. I wish there was a way that I could like flag her down.
Sorry, Ashley, I got muted again.
That is so strange. So you were just talking about password protection and backing up records, and so I don't think we missed a ton, but that's where you're at.
Yep. So if you are a printing company and those sorts of things, where are you storing your files so that you could access them and get your critical functions for your clients back up and running without being able to access your physical location? A lot of folks can do certain things from anywhere in the world now. So making sure that, you know, and I think this COVID-19 or coronavirus situation is sort of driving that home right now, that all of us, as you can see, I'm working from my home. A lot of us are working from remote locations because we want to stay physically distanced from folks. So how are you accessing your critical functions and the services that you deliver? How can you access that offsite? Do you have the critical information necessary to deliver that from wherever you may be? Those are the things to think through on this particular workbook page, and make sure that you have these things available no matter where you are. Okay, next slide, please. So thinking through finances, do you have an emergency cash reserve fund? A lot of small businesses that I work with have days cash on hand to maybe a few days to a few weeks. So an interruption in your business, what would that do to your small business? How many days can you survive with zero revenue coming in? Do you have additional credit available? Right now, the Small Business Administration has made economic injury disaster loans available. DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development through the state of Minnesota, has made small business emergency loans, SBEL loans available for businesses who were closed by governor's order. You have to have 51% of your revenue interrupted by governor's order to qualify for the emergency loans through DEED. But the Small Business Administration has made both economic injury grants up to $10,000 as part of that EIDL, or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, available to small businesses. What financial obligations and expenses must be paid? So there's lots of programs out there right now that we, as the Small Business Development Center, have been helping our small businesses work through. We're helping them decide which ones they're available to them, which ones have partial forgiveness available, and then consider creating a policy around how you will pay people both during and after a disaster. The Paycheck Protection Program loan through the SBA right now, that's administered by local banks, is available to help you keep folks on. Also, the Unemployment Insurance Program, UIMN.org, is providing shared work options to employers who need their employees maybe half-time or part-time through this situation. So look at all of the programs that are available to you for financial needs and write those down. Obviously, as a disaster hits, things change, but make sure you know how many days cash on hand you typically have and how you would address a disaster that would affect that. Next slide, please. So you need to also look at the physical assets that you have, your equipment. Can it be moved quickly? Is it like a tabletop that you can pick up and haul home? So when I had to move out of my office at Mesabi Range College and start working from home, I moved things home by myself in a couple of days. I brought home my extra monitors, my printer, things like that, right? Some office supplies that I need, what have you. Do you need help moving equipment out of a building that has had flooding, fire, a roof cave-in, things like that? Can your equipment be moved? What does it need to protect it during the time that it needs to remain in place? How would you secure it? Are there rental services nearby to allow you to outsource some of the products and services that you manufacture right now? And can you outsource the end product if equipment cannot be substituted, moved, secured, and reused? Next slide, please. So looking at your plan, what have you written down? What kinds of things have you put together? You need to review this with your employees. They need to, as the small business owner, number one, you should have a plan, right? But your employees need to know that you have a plan, what's in it, what things you're prepared for, what their roles need to be. And then you need to look at updating it every so often, because as you bring on a new product line, a new service, a new thing that you sell to your customers, have you addressed that in your plan? Does it change anything? Do you have all of your contact information, like you've written it down, but have you verified it? Have you called these numbers? Have you used these email addresses? Have your employees gotten new phone numbers since you put the plan together? Has their emergency contact information changed? These are all things that you should look at periodically and understand when you need to update it. So sometimes organizations talk about reviewing their articles of incorporation, their bylaws, and certain policies on a schedule. Are you going to review it annually, every 2 years, every 3 years? What works best for your small business? Look at conducting a tabletop exercise, pretending that your business is going through some kind of a disaster, and how would you connect with all of your employees? What would you think about for IT? Can you access these things off-site? Have you changed passwords and usernames since? Did you bring on new software? These are all things to consider when you're going to update your plan, what system or what calendar that needs to be on, what the schedule is, and then how would you test that? Next slide, please. So one of the things that we talk about doing during your plan and putting it together is to get to know who your local emergency managers are. Until Gloria had sent through the information for this presentation, I had no idea that Ely had an emergency manager. And George Berger happens to be the gentleman who holds that title. In your town, you should understand is who's acting in that role. And you should write it down and make sure that you know how to communicate with them and connect with them. Have a discussion with your employees about what their roles are, and make sure that you talk with them frequently, especially as you bring a new employee on. Who should you contact in an emergency for them? All those sorts of things. You know, we fill this out when our kids are in school, but sometimes when we get into a working role, those things don't seem as important because we're adults and we take care of ourselves. But what happens if an emergency is ongoing at our place of work? How would we connect with their family members and make sure that we're keeping the right people up to date on the situation as it develops? There is also item number 3 here, signing up to receive the latest information. So it's mn.gov/deed, and they have a lot of good information for small businesses, employers, and employees. Right now, I visit this site probably 2-3 times a day, looking for the various, helps for my small business owners. I know in the midst of a disaster, you're reading and researching and trying to just get a lid on everything that's happening. And so being aware of all of the resources that are available to you is sometimes overwhelming. So having these things signed up for, written down, seeing their newsletters, etc., on a regular basis will help you stay prepared instead of not having any idea where to go. Next slide, please. So there's a bunch of resources that are out there to help you. The West Central Initiative Foundation is a great, as you can see, they have a Stay Open for Biz, or OFB.org, similar to the workbook that we sent out and we're using during this presentation. So the West Central Initiative Foundation worked together with a bunch of folks around them to create a website for the businesses and organizations in their area to have access to all the necessary things that would be needed for them to start planning for a disaster. So if you're in their region, that would be a great place to start. If you're not in the West Central Initiative Foundation's area, contact your initiative foundations. There are, I believe, 7 or 8 of them in the entire state of Minnesota that were funded by the McKnight Foundation. I work for the Northland Foundation. And connect with them and see if they're interested in creating something similar. They can work with the West Central Initiative Foundation to find out what happened in their planning. And they all are called, I believe they call themselves sister organizations. So they can access the information that West Central used and see what has been put together by them. And it's a great place to get started. The Minnesota Department of Commerce Also has recovery documents, disaster packets, all those sorts of things. This link that we have listed here is a great place to go to get started in the state of Minnesota. DEED has disaster recovery documents for various things that you could possibly do. And then nationally, the SBA also has disaster assistance put together to access for a national level. Next slide, please. So if your business, and right now lots of small businesses are raising their hand and saying yes, if your business could use some assistance, we have a location for you to sign up for help. It's nesbdc.org. We have a central phone number, 218-726-7298. That's the location to go to get help in northeastern Minnesota. Doesn't matter if you're in Grand Rapids, Grand Marais, Tower, Cook, doesn't matter where you're located, Duluth, what have you. All of those two, that website and that phone number, get you to our central information desk, and then those folks will refer you out to the person who covers your area. We have, we're following all of the latest developments from the state and federal government, and we are well aware of all of the different resources that are available. We can help you pick through and select the ones that would help your particular small business now and in the future. And so we're ready and willing to assist you with whatever the situation may have. And our goal is right now, obviously, to help you survive this situation so that you can thrive in the future. And that's what it always is during disasters. In, I believe it was 2008 or 2012, Duluth had a flood. And so the SBDC was there to help small businesses that were affected by that as well. Our role to help small businesses grow and succeed doesn't change regardless of what's going on out in the world. We are connected with the resources for small businesses, and that's our role. Next slide, please. There we go. So at this point, I believe I'm going to turn this back over, but I wanted to point out a couple of the folks on here that help and support my work. So I'm part of America's SBDC. We're a national organization. SBDCs were funded by the CARES Act to provide additional expertise and resources in all 50 states and territories of the United States. And the Ely Chamber has helped us deliver training, connect with small businesses, all that sort of stuff for years. And so they're one of our partners. But I'll turn this back over to Ashley and Gloria to talk through the rest of these folks.
Yes, thank you very much, Betsy, and that was a wonderful presentation. I will let Gloria talk about our fire partners, but I did want to just point out that this webinar would not have been possible, at least not as technologically efficient as we're being able to do it today, without the University of Minnesota Extension. So I've got some great colleagues at the U of M that were willing to provide us their Zoom platform for this, as Dovetail doesn't currently have that capacity to do interactive webinars. So really appreciate the U of M and Extension and our partners also at University of Minnesota Duluth and RI. So just wanted to give them a special shout out for allowing us to use their technology today. So wanted to thank them for that. And Gloria, why don't you go ahead and recognize some of our other partners, and then we can dive into some questions.
Yes, again, our organization, Dovetail Partners, we're here, we're a nonprofit, but we're here to help all of you in any wildfire situation or preparedness. One of our major supporters has been a national organization, actually think tank. We call it a think tank. It's called Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. And it is a group of people from all over the country that are land managers, firefighters, insurance agents, people that are part of the community that were got together in 2013 because they were looking at the rising catastrophic fires all over the country, and they were, said, what can we do to help our communities be more resilient to wildfire? This network is amazing as far as resources, and we all get together, we exchange ideas, we share things that we are doing in our own communities. And to tell you the truth, this webinar would not have even took place if it wasn't for my partners at Fire Adapted Communities that helped supply information and a roadmap to be able to do this. So they've been a huge supporter. And of course, St. Louis County, our emergency management, Homeland Security, they again provide us with a lot of the funding for us to be able to reach out in the community and help our communities be more prepared for fire. So we definitely appreciate working with them as well. We would like one last request. If you could complete the online evaluation survey, the link is going to be in the chat box. It's real short, it's 5 or 6 questions, I believe, and it will help us determine on whether we should keep going with this, and maybe hopefully supply some information from you that you think maybe we should add that would be more helpful. So during this question and answer time, if you could take a look at that and complete that, that would be great. And
and Gloria, I'm just going to jump in real quick. Is I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that I can get that information in the chat pod. But before I do that, I just wanted to say one thing, and I'll turn it back over to you. Go ahead if you have questions to start entering them in the Q&A box, and then I can answer or ask those questions to our presenters from today. So once again, go into the Q&A box and start typing in your questions, and we'll start working through those. And then I will get the survey in the chat pod, but I will also be sending out an email after the webinar with that link to the survey, and also a link to all of those resources, online resources that we had already mentioned. So you already received, hopefully on Monday, a link to a Google Drive with the documents that you can all download, things that were discussed today, but I'll go ahead and resend that link so that you all have that. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Gloria, you can take it away.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Well, I guess right now let's just take a look at if there's question and answer.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll be monitoring that. I'll let you know if anything pops up.
Okay.
Although so far, kind of quiet.
Hopefully people are not sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Betsy. I just wanted to say, Gloria and Ashley, I thank you guys for jumping in and doing this particular webinar during this time. It's been just really easy to work with these folks. So I would encourage you, if you call your community and they don't have a disaster plan, to connect with Gloria to talk through who would help your community address that need. Super easy to work with, very, very on top of things, knows a lot about these areas, and can help with that. So I just wanted to put a little plug in there for you ladies and all the work that you did to make this happen today. It was wonderful to work with you on it.
Thanks, Betsy. And for those of you in the Ely and St. Louis County area, I do plan on doing more workshops or seminars dealing with wildfire resiliency. We're going to be hopefully doing a more in-depth with landowners about insurance. I am available to do risk assessments in your area as well, and help you kind of walk through some of the things that can help you. I mean, if you have time to take care of some things that will lower your risk as far as wildfires. So just know, again, all of us are out there for you. Ashley, do we have
still nothing showing up in the Q&A. If you're having any issues with that, also feel free to drop things in the chat pod. I've also now put the link to the survey in the chat pod, so thank you for that. And then we did get one comment. Jess Edberg says, just very overwhelmed with all the research I now need to do and stress over the financial impact of this situation will have on my organization and my community. Your time is much appreciated. Yes, and thank you, Jess. We know that you probably, if this is new to you, you feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose right now with everything we've thrown at you. This webinar, although not all inclusive of all the resources, we really did this just to get you thinking about things, because some of these items you might not have thought of before in this context. So we really hope that what we're showing you today just gives you some things, food for thought, especially maybe during this slow time when some businesses aren't at full operation. Take that time to plan and be hopefully even better prepared for future disasters. We also have a comment from Rebecca Samilski. Sorry if I butchered that last name, but excellent resources. Thank you so much for putting this on.
Ashley, I'd like to just jump in too and remind anybody who's attending that there are folks to help you with this out there. It can be overwhelming. Starting a small business is overwhelming. Expanding your business is overwhelming sometimes, but there are resources to help you out there with this. And this is some of the stuff Gloria, Ashley, myself, Lindsay, we do the things in our scope of work all day long. So feel free to reach out to us if your question has to do with business or with your community preparedness, those sorts of things. We're happy to help. And we definitely have time to talk you through questions and things like that. So I get that it's overwhelming, but we're still happy to help and want to make sure that you know there is help available.
Certainly, and if you didn't get the chance to scribble down all of those contacts, if you're living in the Minnesota and some of those local contacts that we provided you, all of those contact information details are in one of the documents that's located in that Google Drive folder. And I've just posted that in the chat pod again. Like I said, this will come out in an email probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning, but just wanted you to know that those documents exist and that they've got not only those contact information details, but also those for all of our presenters today too, if you want to follow up. And Lindsay also mentioned too, we also have the OFB-EZ booklets in the office. So if people don't have one or need to grab one, sometimes it's nice to have a physical copy of that. All right, well, I'm not seeing any more activity and people it looks like are starting to jump off the call. So I will keep this open for another 2 minutes. I'll go ahead and turn it off at 10:30. So feel free if a question does pop up, go ahead and go ahead and ask that. But if not, we just want to thank you all for attending and your patience even through just a couple small technical glitches.
Yes, thank you. And we wish all of you the best during this really challenging situation that all of us are facing. Thank you very much for taking the time.